All right, let's get started with weapon select blasters, everybody. When did there become so many of these things? Oh boy, well, we'd better get started, huh? A blaster is a very unique main weapon. It is a weapon that fires single shots very slowly, very slow fire rate. And that's one of the weapon's biggest weaknesses. We'll start with why this weapon isn't seen an awful lot at top level, just the class in general. Fire rate is something that is extremely important in Splatoon for multiple reasons. It's important for damage, of course. Something like a sploosh is going to do really fast damage, and that's partly because it's just hitting a lot of shots in quick succession. And the blaster, on the other hand, it's a little pokey. But this has other implications as well, because paint is also movement. The fastest way to move in this game is by swimming, and in order to swim, you need paint. So if your weapon can't paint for itself, it can't move fast. And so the fact that this shot takes as long as it does, the fact that I'm holding down ZL the entire time I'm firing this shot, and it takes me that long to drop back into the ink, that's crazy slow compared to even something like a mid-weight shooter, which can do this. Look at how unnaturally fast you snap back into the ink compared to the blaster that is just lightning. Again, I'm holding ZL the entire time. I'm buffering, dropping down into the ink, and that's how slow it is. That matters in fights. That's a huge deal. If you don't hit your first shot as the blaster against someone who sneaks up on you, you are probably going to get splatted. Because you just don't have the maneuverability a lot of the time to get out of there. So, it matters in combat for both the reasons of doing damage and moving, so that you can move quickly, so that you can avoid damage in combat. Various different reasons that movement is important and that is a significant disadvantage. Another big reason that that's not fantastic is that you get special slower. Because doing this to paint with that slow of a fire rate means you're not going to get this big bubbler anywhere near as fast, which also means that you're not going to get it anywhere near as often, because it's more likely that you get splatted before you ever get to use it. So painting for special, painting for movement for you, for your teammates, to get out of a situation, to make sure an area is secure, none of those things are going to be strengths of the typical blaster, because it's just so slow at firing its weapon. Now, the ink coverage that you get from a single shot is quite nice. It's pretty wide, and it's immediately swimmable, because it's always going to paint your feet, which is a huge bonus, but for the amount of time that that takes, compared to something like a shooter, it's definitely not, the biggest advantage. So, blasters are a weapon which are very aim-dependent. You have to be able to hit directs pretty reliably. If you're not hitting directs, then you need to just not be in range of the enemy player. You either need to be outranging them with your weapon, or you need to be hitting them in a way that they can't hit you back. And that's one of the biggest strengths of the blaster. There aren't that many weapons that can hit something that's right there and do damage to it. But it's better even than like a slosher or a roller or a brush, in that it doesn't just hit up and over a ledge. Like, it's not that it will just go up and fall down over the top of the ledge. It will actually hit sideways around something. That is an advantage that all of the blasters share. And so you're able to use cover more to your advantage than just about any other weapon in the game, because you are able to hit things that literally can't hit you back in any situation. So that's one major advantage that you could play this for, and that's one of the reasons why this weapon generally gets used the most often in tower. This weapon clears tower better than any other weapon in the game. This class, I should say. because you are able to do damage in a way that they can't possibly return it, you know, from angles that they can't reach, you're in a really good spot if you're shooting at someone who's on the tower. And it's something that you have to remove from the tower, the blaster, before you're going to be able to keep pushing that tower. And that's where you generally tend to see the most blasters. So it does have that going for it, and again, all of the blasters have that going for them. But ultimately, that utility tends not to be important enough to move it past those limitations. There are a few use cases that we've seen people using blasters for, but for the most part, it's not been very popular competitively. People value the mobility, people value the ability to make mistakes with your, combat, with your aim. People value having paint on the ground, not having to run, 3 weapons just to play paint babysitting for this ink-hungry weapon. So, it's unfortunate where its current place is. I think if it had more flank routes, it would be doing a lot better in the metagame right now. Because being able to shark is really important for these weapons. They need to get into range to just do their lethal damage before you know that they're there and can avoid them. It's very difficult to react to this. There's not much that most weapons in the game can do if they don't see that coming. The problem is that right now on the maps that we've got, the area that the blaster has to push through is about this wide in a lot of places, and all it takes is a machine putting a fizzy bomb right there, and now the blaster can't be there anymore. And the blaster could only have hit an indirect from the range that the machine is going to be playing from, so it's not going to be able to do as much. Difficult situation that it's in right now based on the maps that we have and based on the weapons that are popular and how the meta's been playing out. But let's talk a little bit about the basic mechanics of the shot, because this is something that's really important to understand for figuring out how to use it and also how to play against it. When I fire a shot, you'll notice that the path that the ink takes widens right here at the end. There's this circular bit right here. This is the actual blast. This is what can hit up around corners. So, if I am really close to something, like right here, the blast isn't going to hit them. I can't miss them. I actually have to hit a direct in order to hit somebody that's that close. The indirect damage that you get, that hitbox right there, only comes from this circle right here. With this trail right here, if anyone is in this range, you need to be directing them in order for that shot to connect. Otherwise, you're not going to do anything to them. So, that makes it really important for you to understand the range of your blaster. Because shorter ranged blasters, you need to get up fairly close to be able to hit this, and it's not as much of an issue. But if you're running something like the Rapid Blaster, then what you're going to need to do to maximize the utility you get out of that weapon is knowing where your max range is at, so that you're not missing people like this, and that instead you're firing the shots from here where they'll actually hit. Directs generally one-shot. There are a couple of blasters that don't. But for the ranged blaster, the standard blaster, and the Luna blaster, those one-shots are... those directs are going to one-shot. And one nice thing for them in this game is that Ink Armor, which made this weapon much more difficult to pick in Splatoon 2, is no longer a part of the metagame. And so you don't have to worry necessarily about that special interrupting your one-shot. You may still have to worry about squid rolling in some cases, or spawn armor, or something like that, but in my experience that hasn't really been the big difference maker as much as it has been Crab Tank. The problem with using a blaster against Crab Tank is that while you are in a position to be able to hit up around the armor really well, you can hit up past things, the kill time if you're only hitting with indirects, which is what you'd most likely be getting if you're trying to shoot this at a crab tank to get it around the armor, is so slow that the crab just kills you before you're able to get that lethal damage. So with the short-range blasters, you either need to be hitting them from an angle they can't hit you somehow, or you need to be one-shotting them, or you need to be avoiding them. And that's not great for counterplaying them. It's a lot easier to do with a rapid blaster or with a range blaster, because they can hit it from a lot further away, and they're more likely to be able to find angles that it's difficult to contest them from. But the shorter range blasters tend to struggle just getting close enough to the crab tank before they have to find the shots. So that can be challenging, but it's definitely a counterplay option, and it's something you definitely want to consider, especially if you ended up in a situation where you're like, well, it's either this or I die, so I might as well try it. Let's start off here by looking at the Vanilla Blaster. We'll just start from here. Vanilla Blaster is kind of short-ranged compared to some of the shooters that compete for its slot. This is shorter range than a Splatter Shot. Splatter Shot hits from further back than this. I believe it's shorter range than a Splash. Let me see. No, not quite. Splash hits from almost the same range. It's gonna be, right now we're getting fall-off shots, but I don't have to walk very far before I'm at full power. So just barely shorter range, almost negligibly shorter range than a Splash if we're talking about its direct range. Now, remember that burst at the end is something that does damage. So you're going to hit things from further back. You're going to hit things from maybe Splatter Shot range here. This might even be a little bit longer than Splatter Shot range. But from that range, you're doing reduced damage. Yeah, it's slightly longer range than a Splatter Shot. So from this range, you need to be hitting 2 shots. If you want to direct something, you need to be this close. Right about 2 lines away. Talking about the kit. The kit is fairly solid for it. This is, in my opinion, the best aggressive blaster, the best, like, sharking short-range blaster that you can pick. That's probably a controversial choice, but I think that the Autobomb is really good for being able to figure out where a target is and get close to them. That keeps you safe from pushing into positions where you might get your feet painted and get trapped. And the Big Bubbler is also a pretty good fit with it for aggressive use, because who's going to push into this bubble against a weapon that one-shots, you know? It's not the easiest thing to pull off, especially when that weapon is still able to do indirect damage as you approach it, and you're not able to hit it at all. It can buy it some time to hit the 2-shot, and it makes it really difficult to push in, especially with the risk of the 1-shot. One thing that has been a problem for this weapon is that Big Bubbler has not really been in the meta recently, especially with the prevalence of Crab Tank, especially with the prevalence of Object Shredder for trying to beat Crab Tank. Big Bubblers just don't last long in a competitive environment. They go down in 2 or 3 seconds. They're not even the sort of thing that can help you cheese a checkpoint like they were on launch when people didn't know how to counterplay them. Right now, you know, if you're trying to cheese a checkpoint, you're probably talking about more of a Kraken kind of idea. You're probably bringing Booyah Bombs to stop people from staying on the tower, or Tri-Strike if you're trying to counter the Kraken cheese. Those are more the specials that you're using to try and control the objective on tower right now. And since tower is its major niche, the fact that its special is outcompeted a little bit right now, it's not a great look for it. But I really enjoy this weapon. I played a lot of it at launch because it looked like it was a potential meta option. As I played more and more, I started to find that I couldn't really work into comps with my team, and it was just too difficult. It required my teammates to make sacrifices, and it felt selfish every time I wanted to use it. So I ended up not playing it anywhere near as much. So I'm not quite as practiced on it as I used to be, but it will still be... Ooh, we've got tower control. It will still be one of the stronger choices for me out of the blasters that we have to play today. Double blaster. That's a little unfortunate because it means we're going to suffer a lot in terms of paint. Double blaster is generally just not something you want. But what it will mean is that on defense, it's going to be very difficult for them to actually get control of the tower. We can hit this player from over the side before they try to jump over. This player's in some trouble here. Get him there. Able to get rid of the beacon as well. Oh, tried to squid roll over. There. So we're going to just hop up, put this on the tower real quick. And then we're going to just pop over. Pay our friends on blue team a visit. Alright, gets us a decent chunk of points. We can probably keep the tower here, or at least nearby. Clear this area out, because we're a really good weapon for doing that. Good to keep the tower moving a little bit. Oh yeah, we win this. Nope. One nice thing about tower as well is that you get passive special charge from just being on the tower. Unfortunately, the bubbler is not going to help you against a Kraken. Pretty much at all. We'll get that. We can draw the missiles over to here. Get the X-Blow off, and now they're forced into our teammate. A really important skill for a blaster player to learn is to anticipate where the opponent wants to go, because you can use your blaster shot to cut options off, but you need to be very careful about which shots you fire to make sure that they cut them off the maximum amount. They're out of ink. That is the reason I don't... What in the world? Okay, it's not that I'm alive because they're out of ink. It is because they are incredibly, obscenely laggy. Okay, they're not laggy, it's that a teammate DC'd there, so we'll do the best we can to hold. No, we can't approach. My weapon hits these. I thought it hit these. Okay, turns out you can approach. We can go down there. Now we clear the tower. We can quite easily do until Kraken shows up. Unfortunately, nobody else alive to be able to cover it on its transformation, so it gets to just survive there. But we clear the tower. Okay, we get the X-Blow at least. Keep them off the tower, but it is important for us to be moving so that they don't catch on to where we're attacking the tower from. I need to pop this because I'm starting to run out of ground to stand on. I didn't hit the indirect that I needed. That was a spark hitbox. We'll talk about spark hitboxes when we get back into the lobby. Still didn't get that Explo. That Explo is going to make it very difficult to stay on tower. Can we make it? Looks like that was a direct, but it's not going to count. There's the Vanilla Blaster. Pretty powerful Slayer weapon in terms of its ability just to take fights, especially around a lot of terrain. But without as much paint, it can be a little bit more difficult to get in. It suffers a little bit from range, doesn't have the greatest poking tool. Auto Bomb isn't going to immediately do damage in the way that a Burst Bomb will. Burst Bomb would be insane on any of these blasters because the combo potential and also the ability to move, just a really, really powerful option. Let's talk really quickly about the damage. So if I just look at the ground and shoot at the ground, you'll see that it does that. That damage is called spark damage. That is not from like an indirect shot. That is damage that's being done by this little spot that forms on the floor. It's hitting the ground and then splashing up. And so you can see there's a slightly variable amount of damage. Then outside of that, you have your 50 damage indirect. This is about as silly of a hitbox as the weapon can possibly have. And then the closer you get in towards the middle, the more damage that's going to do. I believe the indirect damage maxes at 70. Getting pretty close to 70 there. And then the direct will do 125, which is a one-shot. That's the only kit for the Vanilla Blaster at the moment. Most of the others have multiple kits at this point. We'll move on to the Luna Blaster, which is a very similar playstyle. And this is a pretty fun one. It's very similar to the Vanilla Blaster in that it's an aggressive sharking-style blaster. The Luna has significantly less range in terms of direct. So here is where the regular blaster could direct, and I have to get this close to be able to hit a direct. So from here to about here. Pretty significant in terms of being able to hit those. But one really nice thing about this weapon is that it's a massive indirect radius. Like, you can hit people from really far away with this thing. That's like, I'm not even close to this, but it's still hitting. And that makes it especially useful up over the top of ledges. That's really nasty for dealing with someone who's up there over the top. This is one of the blasters that like, because that indirect radius is so big, it doesn't actually really get hurt as much by jumping. Even in terms of aim accuracy. Like, even in Splatoon 2, you would often see Luna Blaster players jumping all the time, just for movement's sake, because if you're going to get close enough to be able to direct someone, then it's very unlikely you're going to miss. And, you know, like the deviation that it has is less likely to be impactful on the shot. You can see I'm pretty regularly hitting these directs. But also, the indirect radius is going to get extended a little bit further up over a ledge if you're jumping. And so sometimes you may want to be jumping specifically to get the shot close enough to the target. So that's a slight difference in playstyle. This one has a Splat Bomb, which is excellent for any Slayer kit. Lets you kind of cut off options, although you got to be really, really careful about ink consumption, because you look at that, that's 3 shots plus a Splat Bomb, and you're out of ink from full. So Splat Bomb, 1, 2, 3, and now we're out. So you've got to be super careful about how you use it, just because of the ink tank, but still, always nice to have a way to poke from range when you're a weapon that doesn't have a lot of range. That's just a huge plus for the kit. It's also not a bad Zipcaster user, because you're able to zip to a wall and then hit up over the top of cover. Even if you are still behind cover, you're still able to use that indirect radius to be able to hit stuff. So that's pretty nice. Range is probably a little bit nicer to have with a Zipcaster, which is why you tend to see Splatana Stamper's more as a Zipcaster user. And the Octobrush also has a bit longer range than this, and so that's another reason that you'd probably prefer that as a Zipcaster, but it's definitely not the worst user of it by any means. It's a lot of fun. Is that a big swig? If it's a big swig, okay, it's a big swig. We do have a decent amount of paint for us to work with here. That's always something you're looking for on a comp, is the teammates being able to paint for you. Stuck, but we didn't hit him enough. Pretty sure I landed an indirect there. Should probably have comboed for enough damage there. It's a little bit harder for us to clear tower when we have to deal with a big bubbler, because DPS on blasters is not very good at all. Blasters are all burst damage, they're not DPS. That shot was not even close, but I still got the splat because I have a blaster. LOL. I don't like that we're just huddling on tower there. We probably want someone up in front of it instead. But we are able to survive there. We don't have a great means of pushing up except for me, and in order for me to be able to push up, I need a little bit of paint. I need the ability to shark. Got my feet painted there by the curling bomb. Ugh, we all died. Waiting for the missiles. I will get them. My kill time is faster, provided that I am hitting any shots. We just jump over the roller there, and we can one-shot from that, so that's fine. They had a teammate there to follow up, so they did a good job of trading that back, but gives you an idea of the kinds of plays that are possible. You're really not having an easy time handling the Clash Blaster. So we don't really have anything that has phenomenal DPS. The way that you tend to beat a Clash Blaster is just by splatting faster than it does. Back off a little bit there because the Clash is still there, and our teammates did not back off a little bit because the Clash was still there. But we get a double there because we can hit two people at once with the splash damage. There. There we go. And we can just very safely poke around this corner. Unfortunately, we can't paint for ourselves super well, and that was a problem that we ran into right there. I fired one shot, and committing to that one shot meant that I was stuck. I probably could have swam away. But, okay. Another big bubbler. Okay. We need to make sure that we don't go down here. We're in one of the best defensive positions to stop the tower. Oh no, I didn't get this flat. That will. Let's just get out of here. Not a very aggressive Zipcaster, but one that kept me alive, I think, even as I mismanaged it. You can tell that I'm not especially used to Zipcasting. No? Able to get a couple there. Shouldn't be too hard to hold at this point. With 2 down, they don't have a lot of aggressive weapons that can push up and actually grab the tower from us. Just need to not get flanked by the Clash. And they should die here. Oh, they don't even need to die because nobody's on tower. It's a good game right there. It's funny, I always have better games on the weapons that I'm worse with. Play my former main, the Vanilla Blaster. End up having a DC and losing. Play the Luna when I barely have a Zipcaster at all, and here we are. I believe it's the same damage overall as you're going to get out of a Vanilla Blaster, just the radius is larger for the indirect damage. So this brings us to the K Luna, which is a very weird weapon. They gave it a Fizzy Bomb, which is great for like a supportive kit or a kit that's trying to hit damage combos. One nice thing about this is that if you direct with it, you direct with the Fizzy, you can now combo with any indirect shot that you fire. So that's super nice. But if you indirect, you get the 35, you might need to just direct them anyway. You can actually probably get them if you're close enough, yeah. So always try to be aiming as close as you possibly can to them, and you might be able to get this combo, but it's not guaranteed if you don't hit a direct with the Fizzy itself. So that's kind of nice. Fizzy Bomb, you know, always gives chip damage weapons some nice combos that they can work with. But it's paired with Hammer. Hammer doesn't do anything for this weapon. Because if you're close enough that someone's sharking you and splatting you with a hammer, why don't they just shark you with this? It does the same thing. At close range, there's not a lot that you're going to get out of the hammer that you couldn't just get out of the main weapon. It's not like the hammer is going to protect you very often, especially against any kind of weapon with sustained DPS, so you're probably better off just throwing it and then going back to spamming Fizzies or something. It is nice in that Fizzies can kind of help offset the lack of paint that the main weapon has a little bit. So you can play a little bit more on the supportive side sometimes. You can actually try to paint areas of the map. And it's also a mobility tool that you don't have with the vanilla kit. You can kind of swim through it like this. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, Hammer has just not been in a good spot for a pretty long time. And so typically people are going to prefer the Zipcaster over this. Not a lot of paint on this comp. We've got a Dynamo who's a decent source of it. The brush can paint but won't because it's going to need to be running around. And same kind of deal with the E-Leader. It won't because it is going to be firing shots with the leader at people. Not at the floor. You can see I can kind of use the Fizzy Bomb as an entry tool. I can use it to force people out of where I'm trying to go and then go into it. And use that paint to shark. Because the explosions are going to make it so that it's difficult to see that I'm in there too. Don't want to be in a bad spot when the Booyah goes out. It's really important, especially the worse your weapon paints, to pay very close attention to a Booyah Bomb and see where it's being thrown. Because if you can't paint for yourself quickly, you're going to have trouble getting away from it. Well, that was not a hammer throw. But it sends a message, you know? Okay, we've got a Kraken pushing up on the tower at this point, so we're going to need to back off there. I was already pretty hard committed. If I backed up, I would have just run into the Kraken. But we got a checkpoint. It's not a terrible push. Try and keep our escape route clear. Good job that we got the player there. Means we're going to have more time before we have to deal with the Kraken. Nice. Pop off Dynamo player. Back to the wall. Got it a few more points. I probably shouldn't be the one riding the tower. I should probably let, like, the Dynamo do that or something. Back up. So the Booyah Bomb. And now we'll just get right back up. One of the reasons that I'm coming up here is that I want to be able to jump across to the right, because that can give me a really powerful position to control their top right area if they let me get there. My shots were not really on there, but because indirects, we hit those anyway. One of the nice things about the blasters. Oh boy. They didn't notice I was here. That's convenient. Clear this area out, and then we're going to chuck it at the tower. I'm going to be more effective unseen than I am seen. Kraken's out. No sense in trying to fight it, so we're just going to fight its teammates instead. Kraken is down. We stopped it before they got the lead. Fight happening over here. There we go. Kraken down. We'll just hit up over the top of this until we get attacked by the Tri-Slosher from mid. So that'll probably give them an opportunity unless we get that. Yeah, we did. Nice, we got two. We should be able to hold and just win the game here. Beautiful. Well played, well played. It's a lot of fun to play around with the possibilities that you have with the Fizzy Bomb there. Hammer's just not doing that much for you. It's a Monozuka. You throw it, you go on with your life. So that gets us out of the Lunas. So let's talk about the Range Blaster. This is the last weapon that's going to play particularly similar to these. It's definitely more dissimilar than the Luna is to the Vanilla Blaster because it's even slower. It's even chonkier. You know, for a weapon that's already slow and chonky, ooh, man, that fire rate. That fire rate is really something. But being able to one-shot from this range, well, if you aim at the right part of it, because I'm very close to not one-shotting there. Being able to one-shot from that range is definitely nothing to sneeze at. And especially the indirects from this weapon are really scary. Because it can, like, I can indirect that from way down here, and that's a max damage indirect. This is a pretty scary range to be able to do that kind of damage to someone from. And, you know, to be able to do it from over ledges, around corners. So, this is one of the better blasters in terms of main weapons, despite the fact that it is incredibly slow, very, very paint dependent. It's an absolute slog to try and move with this weapon, but because it's got that range, it's got that big blast radius, that kill time, it can sort of make up for it. The bomb is definitely nothing special for it. It's a lethal bomb, which is nice for defense and whatnot, but it would really like something that is able to paint for it, something that can be used more to sort of poke. Like we mentioned before, Burst Bomb would be an absolute godsend for this kit. Like Grim Range Blaster was one of the better blaster kits you can ask for. So definitely very solid there. And Wavebreaker is actually really nice because if you can see someone marked around a corner, I don't even need to see that. I just know that I can hit those 2 shots because I know that someone's there. They're marked. So it's got pretty good synergy with the Wavebreaker. Also, since the Wavebreaker is going to do 45 damage, you're going to be able to one-shot off of an indirect if someone's marked. So, super duper nice. Definitely not a bad special. You're never really complaining about having a Wavebreaker. And the main weapon is serviceable. Just, again, paint hungry, low fire rate, very skill dependent. But if you can hit direct with this weapon, you know, you can take it pretty far. You still see some top-level Japanese players using this thing. And it's totally serviceable to the job. Okay, Double Blaster on the other team. We actually probably have more paint than them, which is kind of wild. I'm just trying to catch someone slipping if they go for the tower right now, because that would be a big mistake on their part. The faster fire rate of the shorter range blaster is going to be a problem if I have to fight it. I need to be very careful to stay out of its range. And since I'm so used to vanilla blaster range from having played it way more, it might be a little challenging, but there we go. I literally cannot see. Okay. There we go. Come on, shoot it. You know you want to. You know you want to shoot the Wavebreaker. Got an indirect on them, but that's not going to be comboed by anyone on my team, so we'll get a checkpoint and then probably have to back off. Or we'll just keep going. That's enough that we can reclaim the tower here. Oh, no. They got killed by the blaster, who shot 2 of them at the same time. Flee into this. Much like Sloshers, it is a really strong choice to, if you really need to clear ledges, to pull out a blaster. And one of those spots that it tends to be very helpful to be able to clear is the stack on Mako Mark. They see me? I don't know if they saw me. I don't think they saw me. And they're down. If you hit an indirect, you just always keep shooting, because you almost certainly painted their feet. And so now there are a lot of weapons that literally cannot get away from you in time. And even if you're playing something like a shooter, sometimes it can be tough. This is a pretty good opportunity we've made. There's a lot of people down. Let's see if I can get attention over here. I didn't paint my feet with that shot because I was out of ink. We got a few more points. It's not the end of the world, but I definitely could have survived that. We need to get out of there. Ooh. And now for the most awkward duel, where the blaster has to hit a direct, or else nothing happens. I'm just going to wait and see if someone decides to try and get up on it. Because at that point, it's going to be easy for me to clear them. But until that point, I don't have a great angle on anything here. I don't think that even directed. I think I was just a little bit damaged from enemy ink. So now we're just not clearing the tower because they have a big bubbler on it. I'll do it. The Squid roll is a very big asset to blaster players, as with any weapons that have relatively poor movement. But man, we are not painting and we are not clearing these blasters out. Oof. Yeah, when the enemy team gets this kind of paint control, it becomes a lot more difficult to deal with the blasters because they're able to shark wherever they want to. Letting in get that much space painted means that I don't have a lot of places that I can go, and it's really difficult to spot where the blasters are going to come from. Alright, so there's your range blaster. Just on the cusp of being viable. There aren't very many people who are trying to make it work, but it's definitely one of the sounder kits that there are.